Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. Today we're doing a conversation with a candidate. Our candidate is Addie Jenne, who's our assemblywoman for the 116th River District here in Jefferson and St. Lawrence County. And with me in the studio is Bess Kearney, who's with the St. Lawrence County AAUW. So she's going to be helping with the questions. Conversations with candidates are designed to provide voter education that thoughtfully and civilly discusses issues of public policy and government in our communities. These are nonpartisan conversations, and they invite a candidate to come in and discuss his or her positions, records, and ideas away from the 30-second campaign ad and the discussion constraints of a debate format. The invitation was extended to both candidates for this office, and we'll be doing the other conversation in a couple of weeks for this office. As a reminder to our viewers, these conversations are not designed to allow for any negative campaigning or mention of the other candidate. This is all about the person we're talking with. So Addie, welcome back to North Country Matters. You've been on the show many times, sometimes as a candidate and sometimes talking with us about issues in Albany.
Yes.
In your position. So it's nice to have you with us, and it's nice to have this opportunity to talk about what the issues are this year for the election.
Yes,
Bess
happy
is gonna,
to be here.
Well, I know you are. Bess, you're going to get us started, please.
Happy to, and welcome.
Thank you.
Can you share with us and our audience what you think are the three biggest challenges facing both New York State and the 116th district in your view? And how do you think you can impact these issues in the Assembly?
Well, I think the things that I focus on really are the big issues. I'm always concerned about our economy and things that I can do to strengthen our economy and create more jobs that pay living wages here in the North Country. I am always very attentive to our education system, whether it is our local schools or our higher education campuses here in the North Country. And then also very concerned about healthcare. There are a lot of changes in healthcare going on right now, and I'm concerned about our ability to have access to quality care here in the North Country. So if I was going to have to only select three: economy and jobs, education, and healthcare.
Well, those are the big three for folks, and they also happen to cover a lot of the economic engines that actually drive our economy here in the North Country. So that's a good selection. Addie, poverty is just a fact of life in rural New York State. St. Lawrence County often leads in unemployment, and we've lost a lot of good jobs since the economy crashed about 10 years ago. They've been replaced by a lot of low-wage and part-time jobs. You mentioned a few minutes ago about you wanting to see jobs that pay a living wage. Mm-hmm. What do you consider to be a living wage for the North Country? It's not the same all across the state, but what would be a living wage here in St. Lawrence County and in Jefferson County that would mean that people didn't have to get on social services to eat or to go to get health care or to meet their basic living expenses?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just start by saying that I have supported increases to the minimum wage here in New York State. We're on pace to get to $15 an hour in the next couple of years. I think having $15 as a minimum wage, I think sets that level of wage. But if you want to be able to try to live a decent life here, you have to go above that. And oftentimes that also means you need two people earning, more than the minimum wage of like $15 an hour. So, I guess if you start that at the bottom, for a family to really try to make it, I think you got to look more toward, reaching $20 an hour. So.
And one of the things that we know is that for families who can't make a living wage, they are automatically thrown back on the county resources, which creates problems for our counties.
Well, I wouldn't even say that, getting to the living wage, you right now, if you make the current minimum wage, you find yourself in that vicious cycle, let alone a living wage. So, and it also depends on where you live. If you need to have reliable transportation to get to work, or as part of your job, you might need to make more in order to be able to sustain your family and provide for that type of a vehicle. If you live in a community where there's opportunities right there, it's a whole different ballgame. But so many of us live and have to commute to work that really drives up the cost to families just to survive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the priorities you mentioned was healthcare, and I wonder if you would share with us, it does play a major role also in the economic health of the 116th. What's your position on the New York Health Act?
Well, I've supported it on numerous occasions. I think that we are at a very critical point, and in not just the state but our country, in terms of how we're going to approach healthcare for the foreseeable future. I've always felt that we should have a single payer system to ensure that everyone is covered by, quote unquote health insurance, that everybody can have access to quality care. Right now, the current system is just, it's just taking middle class and working class families down. The insurance policies are so expensive, and add the co-pays and the deductibles. Just getting basic health coverage can take up a large portion of a family's income. And it's also a burden on our small businesses here. I really think it's time for us to tackle this problem once and for all. Reclaim the profits that these insurance companies are taking out of the healthcare system and put them back into our system here in New York. That's the way to drive down costs for families, and that's the way to ensure that we have healthcare in places like the North Country that struggle because we don't have a large population here, but we still deserve healthcare.
Well, the quality and availability of healthcare in the North Country was enhanced, I believe, since the Affordable Care Act was enacted by Congress. But the current administration and Congress attempts to repeal it will hurt the funding stream that's led to those advances. What are your policy positions on protecting local health care?
Well, it's something I fight for. I've lived here my entire life, and I've got a large family here and an even larger network of friends that need to be able to get to health care. I worry about, the people that are still working in industrial jobs or dangerous jobs, being able to get to a facility that can take care of them, even if it's just to stabilize them, to get to a higher level of care. The folks that still work out at Alcoa, they're quite a distance out, even from their hospital in Messina. I really get concerned about whether or not our communities are going to be able to have health care because of the repeal efforts that are going on at the federal level. There has been no proposed replacement. And I, for one, will be a leader in New York, and I have been, that we need to address this issue. It is of critical importance to our economy. I think if we had a single payer system, it would unlock a lot more economic potential here as well. I think we also have to realize that we have a large population that is reaching retirement age and is going to be needing a lot of healthcare services. We're going to have to pay for that somehow. And I think, making systemic reforms to healthcare is the only way we're going to be able to afford it. We cannot continue to raise taxes on the people that live here and expect things to be sustainable. We are going to have to find savings.
One more question on healthcare, Addie. What is your position on the Reproductive Health Act here in New York State? Is it needed, and if so, why?
It is needed. I have been a co-sponsor of that legislation and voted for it on several occasions. New York State was a leader on reproductive health issues back in the early 70s, and that's when New York State adopted its current statute that deals with a woman's right to choose. Subsequently, the Supreme Court has made decisions, and they took a different approach than New York State did back in the early 70s. New York has never updated its laws to reflect what the Supreme Court has held and its subsequent cases that deal with the same topic. it's important for us to codify what the Supreme Court has already done and not be left with an outdated approach to this issue that is currently on the books. I mean, this is just, that's just basic. We should update state law to reflect what current federal law is.
Thank you. And, you know, along that same line, we've seen some executive action on some portions of reproductive health care, for example, like contraception and things like that. What's your position on making sure that that also becomes state law? Because we know what happens on executive action. You get a new executive and action can change.
Yes, I think most people are expecting that there will be some changes in the state legislature this year, and that we won't have to rely on executive action to provide basic protections for women's health in the state. You know, it is absolutely concerning to me that this day and age that we continue to have to struggle for these basic protections that have really been afforded us for a very long time. You know, and I hope that, you know, after the election that we are able to do what's right for women and for women's health and their families. You know, it's long overdue, and hopefully we will have strong enough majorities to get that over the finish line.
Well, we know one of the things is that women who can make choices about when and how many children to have much better economic outcomes than women who can't. So it's cheaper for society in the long run.
Yes, I mean, the contraception issue is just such a
Why are we still
no-brainer.
fighting it?
Why are we still having this discussion at this day and age? So, but you know, I'm firmly, you know, pro-choice and pro-family planning, and you know, that is where I stand, and that's where I always will stand on this issue.
Thank you.
Addie, you had mentioned talking about the economy, that anymore you really need two parents working.
Yes.
To really get by. But that brings us to the subject of affordable, quality health, childcare.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is an important piece of the employment picture, because if you can't find it, then that limits usually the mother from seeking employment. What's your understanding of the current state of access in the 116th to child care? And are we what they call living in a child care desert?
Well, I would say that the availability of childcare is still woefully inadequate, and changes at the federal level to childcare programs and increased requirements is only going to threaten what little access we have now. You know, I support background checks for people providing care, but, you know, at this point they want grandma to get background checked, you know. I mean, we're kind of getting to a level of, you know, that's really going to challenge even some of the old traditional ways that we've always gotten along here in the North Country, and because we've been fortunate to live in a more traditional community where we have multiple generations that can, you know, pitch in. I'm a prime example. My parents are my child care providers. My father did most of it from when my children were infants, and still does, you know, usually does the bus route, so to speak, to get the kids. I was able to secure funding for SUNY Potsdam to build a brand new facility. I'm hopeful that that will help to energize our young people in this area, or even our non-traditional students, to look at childcare as a business opportunity, as a professional opportunity, that they will have a beautiful state-of-the-art facility to work in and to learn in, and that will help us to generate more people that are interested in providing that service in our communities. But there are other systematic things that we have to do to support childcare. We have to ensure that there is reasonable reimbursement for those that qualify for subsidies. Right now, the state does not provide even the cost. They don't even cover the cost of childcare for people that receive subsidies. And so that is being made up on the backs of our working poor that aren't eligible for subsidies. And that is, that's unacceptable to me. And so I've been working in the Assembly majority to try to improve, you know, the situation for our child care providers that are stuck in an unsustainable model because of how the state provide subsidies for childcare, and then also the onerous requirements that are placed on childcare facilities that make it very difficult for them to attract and retain workers.
And there's another side to this too. It's just not in this case, the mother who will be prevented from going out and getting that second job to help the family, but the businesses themselves suffer when there isn't available, quality, affordable childcare. What role do you think business could play in addressing this issue?
Well, I think, businesses can, first of all, they can use their voice and talk about the fact that childcare is, so linked to economic development. We know this is the case. We have job openings for, all sorts of people here in the North Country. But if you financially can't afford to work, which is a chronic problem here in the North Country, it constrains these employers from being able to grow organically like they might in other parts of the state. Mm-hmm. But I do want to point out that I have noticed a lot of men who are taking on the role of child care provider. When we were at the opening of the new facility at SUNY Potsdam, dads were there picking their kids up. They are, there's a lot more of the non-traditional dynamic going on right now, and I think that's probably the result of good mothers, maybe of your generation. Talking about, that moms and dads both play an important role, and dads can stay home too. So it really is a good investment, childcare, because it does allow for more productivity within our population in places where we need a workforce. I mean, you would be surprised with the number of businesses that I go to that are always hiring. So, and also if you look at not being able to find childcare, you may have a young person who wants to continue their education, and that is also creating a hiccup in their ability to continue to further their earning potential as well. So, being in a community with four four-year colleges right here, that's also an important dynamic for us to understand as well.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Addie, one of the things that I want to chat with you about next is climate change. For millions of Americans, in fact, folks even today in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, as this latest hurricane is going over the tops of their heads, climate change is no longer just a chart or a graph. It's wildfires, it's floodwaters, it's drought, it's hurricanes and heat waves.
It's driving severe weather.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the emerging new normal. Where do you stand on climate change, and what should New York State's government be doing about it? And what are they doing about it?
Well, I think we all realize that dependence on fossil fuel is, driving our climate change, and that we need to get off of those types of fuel that continue to pollute our air. Those are, I think that's just the solution. In New York State, we are trying to reach ambitious goals of bringing on renewable energy that then can be distributed around the state. Those targets are out there, and incentives to build renewable energy generation are out there, but we also have to understand that it's not just building that generation, it's making sure it gets to the customers that need it. I give the state high marks for its goals for renewable energy. However, we need to make other investments that will allow us to get off of other fossil fuels and not have to import it from other states. We have to invest in transmission at a much higher level to ensure that the green energy we produce here in the North Country can get all the way down to the users in the more populated parts of our state, like into New York City. That system needs a lot of improvement in order for us to get off of those polluting facilities that have to come on when it's really cold or it's really hot. If we're going to get off of those types of peakers, is what we call them, then we're going to have to address transmission. And then also, we need to do far more in terms of investing in energy efficiency projects, and whether that is at the home level or at the business level, we have to ensure that we are using the energy we produce wisely and not just taking it for granted that it's there and it's always going to be there. So I think we should focus more on transmission and energy efficiency.
Okay, thanks.
Now, Fort Drum is an important part of your 116th district.
Yes.
And I understand it is the last major military installation in New York State.
It is the largest and by far.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I would say it's, yes, it's really the installation in the state. There are others around the state. There's some in Syracuse and in Western New York and in New York City. But Fort Drum is a very large installation with a lot of activity.
So tell us about your interactions with Fort Drum.
Well, they're fairly regular. I get invited to a lot of events out there. I can make it to a lot of them. But you know, they are the most deployed division in the Army, and a lot of the times when I'm out there, it's because they're either coming back or they're getting ready to go somewhere else in the world. They are called upon for every type of scenario, and it's important that they are prepared to go so that they can come back.
Yeah.
You know, one of the biggest threats right now to Fort Drum is the fact that their radar systems are compromised because of wind turbines around their very sensitive Doppler systems. You know, it's already impacting their ability to train, and there are a series of projects that are proposed that could really make it very difficult for them to be able to train. They would actually have to probably shut down the windmills in order to train appropriately because they utilize aircraft and ground forces at the same time. You know, this is not only probably the most important military installation in New York State. It's I believe the most important military installation this side of the Mississippi. The ability for troops to come and train and be prepared for today's military threats is extremely important. Being able to be a leader in the globe and to be able to project our democratic values abroad is a very important thing. And so the military is part of that, and the men and women need to be able to train safely. And I have been and will continue to be a leading advocate for what they need in order to serve and protect us and come back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Addie, as we get ready to vote on November 6th here in the United States and in New York State, one of the things that New York is in desperate need of is modernization of our voting laws and some voting reforms. We have one of the worst voter turnout records of any of the states, and it's because we really haven't done anything to modernize our current system. What's your stand on modernization and reforming voter laws, and what are your policy initiatives in this area?
Well, I have voted several times for voter reform measures. One of the things that really should be a no-brainer is early voting. You know, we make it very difficult for people to vote. And I think that if we could pick one thing to do that would really transform voting habits, it would be to allow people to begin to vote a couple of days before election day at a minimum. That's an easy way to do it. There's also other things like the deadline to register to vote for November is in October. Some people don't really start to get engaged or realize how much local or state or national elections mean to their lives until you get much closer to the election. We know that as people that are active in civics and government, allowing people to be able to register to vote much closer to the election, I think, is also an improvement, a reform that we should make. So,
Thanks.
but, yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up, and I know we've covered this ground, but what do you want voters to know about you and your vision for the North Country when they head to the polls? Why should someone vote for you?
Well, I think people should vote for me because they're not going to find a candidate that's going to work harder for them or that truly understands what they're going through on a daily basis. I lived my whole life here except for when I went to college, and I'm raising my kids here. And I have a big family, and so just about anything that could happen and does happen in our world happens in my life too. I truly understand what we go through here in the North Country, the particulars of what our life is like here, our values, what our dreams are for the future. I also know our economy. I know how it works. I've watched different cycles of how things operate in agriculture, in our hospitality and tourism sector, in our education sector. I truly understand the fabric of our community and our economy. And with that knowledge, I think I'm able to be extremely effective for our area. I'm able to drive investments to things that really make a difference in our daily lives and also save us money. And I come from very frugal people. I grew up with not a lot of money, and I come from farmers. It's just kind of already built into me to find the best solution to something that's gonna, cost us the least amount of money and is gonna have the largest amount of benefit. I focus on things like our police and our fire and our EMS, our schools and our libraries, our programs that help our senior citizens. I'm always thinking about how we can do the most with the least, because that's been always what I've had to do in my life. And I'm a hard worker. I work hard every day to try to solve our problems. Not just to focus on the things that maybe other people are already latching on to, but to work on those plus the other things that maybe people aren't paying attention to. Our farmers right now are struggling terribly, and they're not really able to advocate for themselves because they're out on the farm working hard, just trying to eke out a living. I like to give voice to those who aren't really able to be active participants in our political system, those that are struggling, those that if we did just a couple of things differently would make all the difference in the world. My experience, my relationships, my record of getting results is why people should re-elect me to the New York State Assembly, so that I can continue to work in our communities with local officials and organizations to build us up stronger. Because I think at the end of the day, yeah, we want a better life here for us, but we want to make sure that there's a place here for our kids when they grow up and get out of school and are wanting to set down roots. That's why I do this. This isn't a job to me, this is my life. This is our life, and that's how I approach my work on behalf of this area every day.
Thank you, Addie, so much. I want to take just a second to show everybody the map of the 116th, which is on the northern half of Jefferson and St. Lawrence counties. It's why it's called the River District, and you've taken a pretty broad stretch along the river and a lot of townships. I want to remind our voters that Election Day is November 6th. If you need an application for an absentee ballot, it must be postmarked by October 30th, something that we could reform, maybe. Elections are always decided by the people who show up to vote, so make sure your vote counts. Addie, thank you for coming in today. It's been a good conversation. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which are filmed here in the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center of the Potsdam Public Library. These shows are a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters and American Association of University Women and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters, and make sure you vote. Addie, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.